Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar from Ciphr and Marshalls E-Learning. Today we're exploring how to create a culture that's supportive of good mental health, particularly when operating in an organisation that's working remotely or in a hybrid way. I'm Catherine, I'm Head of Content here at Ciphr Group. With me today is our expert Mark Crabtree. He's an independent organisation and leadership development consultant and former Assistant HR Director at Durham University. Welcome, Mark. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Catherine. Lovely to be here. Thank you.
Before I hand over to Mark, just a little bit of housekeeping about the agenda and who we are in case you haven't come across us before. So here's the agenda. Like I said, we'll take you through a quick look at Ciphr and Marshalls software and content services. We'll look at the warning signs of declining or poor mental health, the scale and impact of poor mental health in the UK, prevention strategies and action plans, the role of organisational culture, and taking a strategic whole organisation approach to mental health. This is being recorded, so if you'd like to catch up at any time, you can view the recording and we will email that to you later today. We'd like this session to be as interactive as possible, so there's a control panel that you'll see on your screen where you can send in questions. Please send them in at any time. Mark and I will pick those up either as we go along or in our dedicated Q&A at the end. So if you're new to Ciphr, we are a specialist provider of HR payroll, recruitment and learning solutions. Our solutions are used by more than 600 organisations across the UK in a variety of sectors. If you want to find out about any more of our products or solutions, you can visit our website at ciphr.com or email us at info@ciphr.com and we'll be happy to help. Marshall E-Learning became part of Ciphr Group in spring 2023. They have been innovators and leaders in people development for more than 20 years, with a historically strong focus on diversity and inclusion. Marshalls has trained more than 2 million people globally across 300 customers, and they provide regular course updates to make sure that all their courses are up to date and accurate and relevant to your organisations and your needs. And they combine in-house specialist knowledge combined with technical expertise and often work with external experts like Mark to create their in-house content. And just to highlight some content that's particularly relevant to what we're talking about today, one of the topic packs that's available in Marshall's E-Learning Content Library, off-the-shelf content library, is mental health and well-being. And within that suite of content, there are themes such as mental health at work, mental health fatigue, well-being and resilience, guidance and managers on having good well-being conversations, and managing your own self-care and stress management. If you'd like more information after this webinar about this content pack or about any other types of off-the-shelf content that's available from Marshalls, we'd love to talk to you. Just send in a comment using the question panel and we can pick up your name and get back to you afterwards. Or you can opt in using the exit survey form that you'll see when this broadcast ends. And we'll get back to you and try to understand how we might be able to help. So now I'm going to change presenter and hand over to Mark. So just bear with us as we change control of the slides.
Right.
Yeah, just expand that full screen, Mark, and we're good to go.
Can you see that okay?
Thank you. Yeah, that looks great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to be on this particular seminar. A little bit about myself. So I'm Mark Crabtree. I have written some packages for Marshall. I also have my own consultancy business, but my background has always been in people and organisational development. Between 2002 and 2018, I was at Durham University. I started as training and development manager and then became the assistant HR director responsible for leadership and organisation development. And what I want to do is just to share my story and my thoughts during my time at Durham and beyond. And when I was researching this particular content for this, I was on my phone and a picture popped up from Facebook, and like you get on Facebook, you get a memory popping up, and this picture actually popped up on screen. And you can see there that that picture was taken on the 6th of September 2014. And there I am, smiley face, and there's Christine, my wife, and my son, Josh. And my daughter, Emma, wasn't there. I think she was out with her friends. And that is taken at a place in Newcastle upon Tyne called the Boiler Shop. And if you look at that particular picture, we're all smiling faces. You know, it's a happy photograph. It's probably one of the best selfies we've ever taken. So I'm actually looking at the screen there. But then what happened, just to say that 2 days later, on the Monday, I had a breakdown. I had a mental breakdown. And what happened on the Monday was I woke up, I could not get out of bed, I burst into tears, and I thought everything was going to come to an end. You might not think of that when you look at me, smiling faces and a glint in my eye, but there was lots going on behind the scenes. There was lots going on in my head, which I was keeping to myself. And I just want to share with you a little bit about this story. So really, when people used to see me, they used to think I was on this end of this particular spectrum here. You know, I was assistant HR director. I used to give presentations. You know, I was very visible in the organization. And yes, I did enjoy my job. But inside, there was an awful lot going on. So whilst from the outside, people saw me thinking I was flourishing and everything was going okay, in reality, I was there. So what was causing that? Now, one thing I want to say, it wasn't all work. There was a lot going on. And I created a narrative in my head that created a perfect storm. So what was going on? I had a demanding role. We had a lot to do within the university. I used to find myself answering emails at 11:45 at night. I was very determined to make a positive impact within the university, and I was starting to doubt whether I could actually do that. My son in that photograph was going to university. He was moving down to London, and we're quite a close family. And with all the anxiety that was happening, that was getting on top of me as well. The other thing as well is that when I was a student, back in 1983, I worked in a power station for 3 months, stripping boilers in power stations. And that played on my mind because I started to suffer chest pains at that time in 2014. And I went to the doctor and I had chest x-rays. I started suffering stomach pains. I had endoscopies. I had colonoscopies. I had the whole range of things. And I think I must have been prodded and poked many, many times. And in my mind, I was seriously ill. I used to go to the doctors and the doctors would say, there's nothing wrong with you. You're perfectly okay. But what was happening in my mind was that I was having a demanding job. I was not able to give my best because I was feeling ill. I was feeling ill because I had a demanding job. I was also worried about my son going down to university, which I needn't have worried, but I'm guessing it's a parental thing. And I was bottling this up all inside. So on the Monday, everything came to a head. I got out of bed. I couldn't function. And Christine said to me, I'm taking you to the doctors. I'm taking you to the emergency doctor. I went to the emergency doctor and he diagnosed me with depression and anxiety. And I was off work for 3 months. The first few weeks of that, the guilt was almost unbearable. I was letting myself down. I was letting my family down. What would people think of me? And when you look at what was going on in my mind, this kind of thing was going on. The likelihood was that I was going to lose my job. I wasn't good at my job. People were criticizing me. I was seriously ill. Things would be awful. Things would be terrible. I wasn't able to cope. My coping mechanism was really low. So when we have a look at this, the probability of me losing my job in my head was quite high. Also, when we looked at this, what people was, I was thinking is that, people are not going to want to help me. I wasn't able to deal with any kind of setbacks. I was worried about people's reactions, and the anxiety was going up and up and up and up. And also, it wasn't the kind of image that I wanted to project in my career at that time. Now, I have to say that the university was very positive. The university was really a good employer, and my team were absolutely superb. My team took up the reins, and I was blessed with a really effective and caring and compassionate colleagues. But I remember going to the occupational health in the university. I had 2 appointments, one early on and one later on. The first appointment, I parked my car as far away as the university as I could, so I could walk in. I didn't want anybody to see me going into occupational health, so I went around a route around the back of the university and snuck in, and maybe had my hood up and went into occupational health because I didn't want anybody to see me. That was how I felt. I learned an awful lot about myself during that time. I started to reflect on my experiences. I started to reflect on what was happening to me. And when I went to occupational health in the end of November, beginning of December, before I came back to work, I thought, sod it. I am going to walk down through the university to occupational health with my head held high because I am ill. I have an illness, I am on the road to recovery. And I learned an awful lot about myself. I also learned a lot about the attitudes to mental health. And also I learned a lot about coping strategies. And that's what I want to share with you during the course of this particular seminar. Those 3 months were really difficult. And yes, I still sometimes have self-doubt. Sometimes I look at this equation and think, am I going down that kind of slippery slope? But what was happening? If we look at this kind of this slide here, I was suffering all these kind of things. My confidence was on a downward slope. Was I able to cope? Could I cope with the demands that were placed on top of me by a new director, by my colleagues? Was I able to give my best? The changing socialization patterns at work, I was avoiding people. I would go out for lunch for a long time. I'd go on my own. I would excuse myself from meetings. I would go lock myself in the toilet. I would get away from work because I didn't want anybody to see me. And there was real change in my behavior. And when I look back at this was not a change that happened overnight. This was a change that had happened many months, if not years, before that day in 2014. I was not looking after myself. I was eating more. I was not taking exercise. I was drinking more. And also I was feeling poorly, and this physical illness playing on my mind, and this got me into a negative cycle. And my energy levels were really, really low. Now, these were the signs that, when I look back, were evident for many, many months. But why didn't I do anything about it? Why did I think I could cope? Why did I think I could actually deal with these signs that led to me having and developing mental illness? I just wanted to reflect on that for a moment. And what we'll do is just explore some of this and look at it through the lens of an organization. When I was researching the material on mental health, and I keep looking at stuff online, and I do quite a lot of reading, I came along a survey from an organization called Westfield Health. Now, Westfield Health were founded in 1919, and they carry out quite a lot of well-being research. And their survey earlier on this year states that 30% of people feel that their mental health has worsened in the last year. 49% of UK employees feel that their manager is available for wellbeing support. Now, 49% is a good 49%, but it means that 51% may not feel that their manager is available for wellbeing support. If I go back and think about my signs, why didn't I do something about it? Why, if I was going through this, a loss of confidence, if my behavior was changing, if I wasn't looking after myself, I was feeling ill, why didn't I do something about it? I didn't even talk to my wife or my family. It was something that I wanted to keep to myself. And maybe it was because there was a stigma attached. In my mind, there was a stigma attached to showing these symptoms and not being able to cope. So the first thing that we've got to think about when we are thinking about mental health is there parity between mental health and is there parity with physical health? If I'd been off with a broken leg, yeah, or if I'd been off with appendicitis, or if I'd had a serious illness, you know, how would have I felt there? But I was off because I was suffering from anxiety and I was suffering from depression. And I still am prone to certain degrees of anxiety and a certain degree of depression. And I've got to really take care of myself and think things through. So that is a question I want you to think about within your organization. You know, if you think about mental health and physical health, do you think there is parity with those two things? Should we separate mental health and physical health? Or should we have more of a holistic term that thinks of health as being both mental and physical, and we do not need that dichotomy in place? Because sometimes, you know, what we do is we pay more attention and more value on one than the other. Now, in the work that I've done, you know, involving Marshall ACM, where we did some work with a number of universities, one thing we wanted to do is to challenge the stigma that is still attached in some cases to this whole area of mental health, and to really question whether there is parity between these two terms. So if we look at what the World Health Organization is saying, and this is taken from the World Health Organization website, and it's dated the 17th of June. And I'll just let you read that just for a few seconds. And what I'll do is just pick up on a few key things that really, you know, resonate with me. So mental health is a basic human right, and it's crucial to personal, community, and social and economic development. A basic human right. Also, mental health is more than an absence of mental disorders. It's not about mental disorders. It is very much a complex continuum. And if we go back to what I showed you before, that continuum, yeah, we get people who may be flourishing and people who have got mental health that's severely impacting them. And I know from my experience, even now, I can go between one end and the other. And that is about how I feel and what I do, and also what kind of support that I get. Also, what we know from this particular definition, yeah, is that it's experienced differently from one person to the next. There is no real definition that fits everybody. Everybody experiences difficulties and distress. They're in very different social situations. We experience, you know, our mental health in a variety of ways. And do we really show that in the organizations in which we work? And what we've got to be able to do is to think about how we're going to deal with that. So what does this mean about organizations' approaches to mental health? If we think about our organizations, you know, most organizations are pretty good in supporting people when they get ill. They are pretty good at making sure that there are reasonable adjustments, making sure that they are supported when they're ill. They're pretty good at making sure that there is a good return to work process in place. very good at making sure that occupational health is there to support their people. A lot of organizations now do provide training on resilience, on stress management, and also put in place interventions around well-being. So it may be some well-being days that you have. You may do some things on diet. I know at the university where I worked, in our staff induction, we did a huge piece on well-being. And I know that, you know, we're very proud of the things that we did. So we do support people when we get ill. We do provide training on stress management and resilience. But what about culture? Do we in our organizations really understand what it is about our organizations that impact upon the mental well-being of our people? What are the things that we do or we don't do that sometimes can make people feel that they're unable to cope? And it is that bit that is a challenge for most organizations. Yes, we can do the helping bit very, very well, but can we really look at our culture through a fine microscope and say, what is it that we're doing or not doing that may be impacting upon our people? So if we think about that in a little bit more detail, what we've got here is we have got this kind of, you know, tertiary, what I call tertiary prevention, employee assistance programs, return to work support, specialist support, signposting to people who are specialists, you know, having good links with counsellors, the NHS, bringing people in to really support people. That tertiary prevention bit is really good in lots and lots of organisations. But then we look at the secondary prevention. This is the training and development, the resilience training, the wellbeing provisions. And I put employee assistance programs in that particular box as well. We actually are pretty good at doing that. We can help and support people. But it's a bit in red here. And I've used a bit of a traffic light, you know, with coloration here. But it's this primary prevention. And this is the challenge that we've got, especially when we are working in different ways in a hybrid environment where the working day is different and working protocols has changed. It's this primary prevention that I believe we need to get better at within organizations. And that involves having a strategic, systemic approach and looking at what we do and how we support our people and how we allocate work and what's the flow of work through those organizations. And it's that strategic approach, that cultural approach, that I think is going to have the most positive impact if we can really get into that red area and not assign it to the too difficult box. So it's creating an organizational awareness of systems and processes and protocols and politics, and it really starts to get to the heart of organizational design. What is it that we are doing that's helping our staff, and what are we doing that's hindering our staff? And I think it's really important that we create space for conversations. Now, I'm not just talking about, you know, water cooler conversations, which, yes, are important, but do we really create space where we can get good two-way feedback, where we talk about what is happening in the organization? And one thing that I think is really important, and I know we've got a lot of HR people, you know, on this particular seminar, it's about having linked and what I call co-created policies. Using the people, using the evidence, using the experiences of people within the workplace to have those co-created policies. And what we've got to be able to do is to have the strategic position of occupational health. That is really, really important. So I put two things at the bottom there, which is about risk assessments and wellbeing plans. And I'll talk about that in a few moments. So let's have a look at what we are going to, well, you know, look at here. So let's first of all, let's talk a little bit about technology. One thing that we are doing is that we are embracing technology more and more within our workplaces. Yeah, we're now on a video webinar. Yeah, so I'm talking to people across the UK, maybe across the globe. We have got Teams, we've got Zoom, we've got various software packages, SharePoint, things that are really helping with our efficiencies in organizations. It is driving the need for flexible working. But how is that balanced in your organization with challenging this always on culture? Now, one thing that I was talking about when I fell ill, it wasn't all work. A lot of it was the choices that I was making. I had colleagues at the university who had different working patterns to me. I had a senior colleague who would come in early in the morning, leave, mid-early afternoon, and work from home. This is before the pandemic. This is back in 2013, 2012, because it worked for that individual. And that was great. But one thing that we wanted to do is that we wanted to, make sure that we had this kind of flexible working going on. That individual would then jump back on the email about 8 or 9 o'clock at night and send emails out. I had an iPad, and on that iPad I had, my private stuff and my work stuff. I found myself answering emails late at night. That was my choice. I am not blaming anybody here, but that is my choice. The expectation that I placed upon myself. My working pattern was very different. I used to get into work at about 9:15, and I used to leave probably about 6:30, 7:15. That was my choice because I wanted to miss the traffic. That was a different working pattern to my senior manager. What I found was that I was not only adopting their working pattern and jumping back on the email late at night, but I was trying to do that alongside the demands on my job. And that took its toll. And if I wasn't able to do that, I thought, I'm not coping. Now, if we think about this kind of technology, the flexible working, which is great, are we challenging this always on culture that sometimes develops alongside it? What are the expectations that you have of your people? What do you expect them to do and not do? And do you make that clear? And I think that is really, really important when we are thinking about mental health and the use of technology. It's about clarifying expectations. It's about having a dialogue with the people about what will work for them and what will work for the organization. And one thing that I see now, a lot of people doing their email signatures is to say, I am working flexibly. I will not get back to your email, straight away, or words to that effect. What you're putting in the email signatures that are helping to clarify those kind of expectations. But then we think about the role of managers within this. And when we think about managers are what I call in the squeezed middle. Managers quite rightly need to be aware of the well-being of their staff. Okay, how can they make their staff feel energized, empowered, motivated, but also how can they manage the demands of the organization? How can they make sure that the organization pursues its vision and its mission with confidence? There are objectives, there are things that need to be achieved, maybe put down by senior managers. Those are the things that need to be done. So how can we make sure that our managers in that squeezed middle, where they're balancing the two demands here of the organization of the staff? Because sometimes it is those managers that really find it tough, find it really hard. So my question to you is to think about, how do you support those managers? Yes, we've got training, but also how do you create a culture where people can look and talk about the well-being of staff? Now, a couple of things that I've seen organizations do, and I would really support this across most of organizations, and a lot do it in a slightly different way. And this is about, having a conversation about well-being, but not just when people are struggling or where people are having difficulties. have this conversation with all staff, maybe when staff join, or maybe in team events or individual events, or even in, you know, appraisals and performance development reviews. What helps you stay mentally healthy at work? Yeah, what can your manager do to support you in staying mentally healthy at work? You can read the questions there for yourself. Now, this is an opportunity for people to sit down and say, what are the things that we can do to support you so you can bring your best self to work and that you can be as effective and as engaged? So these are the things that are really, really important. Now, I just want to draw your attention here to number 7. If the warning signs are noticed, what should others do? Now, the thing is, what we don't want to talk about, we don't want to talk about normal behavior, because what is normal behavior? What is normal for you is maybe not normal for me. And maybe I want to talk about usual behavior. What was my usual behavior at work? What were the things that I was doing that was unusual when I was on this kind of slope to having that breakdown that I had in the September 2014? What were the warning signs? Maybe I should have spoken to my team, maybe I should have spoken to my colleagues and given permission to say, Mark, is everything okay? Can we talk about this? Yeah, give them permission to talk to me about how I was behaving at work. But I was assistant HR director. Yeah, you know, did I give them permission to do that? Maybe I thought I did, but clearly I probably didn't. So what are the things that go on? What are the things that we need to do that we, so we can create a culture where there are these kind of conversations going on? But as well as having individual wellness action plans, get the team together. Talk to the team. What activities support the mental well-being of the team? What can you do to support each other? Are there any situations that trigger poor mental health within the team? So having those conversations and having space for those conversations, I think, is really, really important. But not doing it when there is, you know, somebody who feels that they're not coping. Create space and time and normalize these conversations. And I think that's what's really important in organizations now, is about normalizing these conversations. And this is where we start to think about culture. Now, if we think about culture, I talk about a culture of permissions. Now, what I mean by a culture of permissions is give people time and space to reflect back. A lot of work that I do, I talk about review. You know, do you review outcomes? Do you review what you have achieved as an organization? Do you review the successes and the challenges that you've got? And most of us do review the outcomes of our work, but do we review process? Do we review, well, how did I cope with that? How did I feel about that? What impact did that have in a positive way or in a negative way on how I engage with my job and people? Have permission to think about how we're going to do this in terms of what's happened there. Can you still see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it. We can see your calendar, Mark.
Okay, I don't know why you can see my calendar. That's gone off. This was not.
Can't see the slides anymore. I'm happy to bring them up on my screen if you'd like.
Yes, if you can bring them up on my screen, it just completely vanished.
Okay, no problem. Let me just do.
Now, I'm not going to get anxious about this. I'm just going to make sure that everything is okay. There we go.
Okay, where are we? This one, culture?
Yeah. Okay, so, you know, it's about giving time for people to reflect back. We want people to reflect back and not just reflect the outcomes, but reflect the process as well. And also, it's about removing negative labels. Now, with one particular university that we worked with, one thing that was really important and was at the heart of the intervention that we designed for them was about removing negative labels. So, you know, don't use things like, you know, oh, that's not normal behavior, because what is normal for one is not normal for others. It's about what is usual for that particular individual. How many times do we say in the conversations, you know, are you crazy? Or that's a crazy thing to do, or that's insane. Now, the thing is, what we do is we don't use those kind of things where we say to people, you know, oh, are you heart diseased? You know, are you canceric? We don't use those kind of things. So why do we say, are you insane or are you mad? People who are mentally ill, we've got to make sure that we challenge those negative labels, and we challenge that negative language, and we challenge the negative stereotypes. If we can create an organization where we can have honest, open, and supportive conversations, I think that will help us move to a culture where we are taking the mental well-being of our people really, really, you know, at heart. So it's about permissions. It's about permission to reflect back. It's about permissions to challenge negative labels. It's about permissions to challenge negative behaviors. It's about permissions to challenge stereotypes, but challenge in a way that help organizations grow. I think it's also about safe self-disclosure. And that is about confidentiality, and it's about exploding the myths. If I am going to say something, how is that going to be dealt with? And part of that has got to be about role models. Now, going back to my experience, I had a phased return to work in early December 2014. One of the first events that I was involved in was a big staff induction event. And I invited a senior manager to speak at that event. And this particular senior management stood beside me, waiting to go and do their bit on stage. And they said to me, "Oh, Mark, I understand that you've been off work for a few months. Is everything okay?" And I thought, I'm going to say why I was off work. Yeah, I'd learned an awful lot about myself. So I told them a little bit about what I'd been going through. And this senior manager then looked at me and said, "Thank you for sharing that, Mark. I think that there's lots of people in this organization who may be feeling that way, but don't feel comfortable mentioning it." And that sort of struck a chord with me, is why do people not feel comfortable mentioning it? What was it about having that kind of conversation? After Christmas, early 2015, I was in a meeting with, again, another senior manager and their PA. And this particular senior management said to me, "Mark, how's your Christmas been? I understand you were ill before Christmas." And again, I decided to share with them my story. I go back to my office, and about half an hour after I'd been in my office, my phone went, and it was their PA. And their PA said to me, he said, I just want to thank you, Mark. I just want to say thank you." And I say, "Well, okay, why are you thanking me?" He said, "Just for being open and honest about your journey." I said, "Oh, that's fine." He says, "No, but you've given me confidence that I can have that conversation with my director, because I have been feeling that I'm struggling in certain areas." Now, I never wanted to be a role model or a poster boy for this kind of thing, but I think it's about having this self-disclosure in a safe environment where we can talk about those things. It's about making sure that people are seeing the whole person. Yes, I got a lot of support from the organization, a lot of support from occupational health and from my colleagues, but it's about creating that kind of arena where we can have those kind of conversations. So I think that goes back to culture. I think it is a cultural thing about permissions and about safe self-disclosure. Can you go on to the next slide, please, Catherine, if that's okay? So I picked up a publication by Robertson Cooper, and it was a guide to creating good days at work, and the bold things I put in place here. And one thing they're saying is that what is really important is about organizational awareness. What is it that creates the pressure and the high demand on our employees? What is negatively affecting their well-being? What is it we're doing or not doing? Are we having conversations about that? Are we exploring that? Where in the organizations are those pressures and demands most prevalent? Are there certain areas, certain functions? Is it certain times of the year? Are there peaks and troughs of activity? Is somebody's peak somebody else's trough? What is it that goes on? Are we looking at organizations in that way? What can we do to mitigate these pressures? What can we do as an organization to create that awareness and to put in place solutions that would help with that situation? Now, I'm not saying that we take all the pressure away in an organization. That would be impossible to do because some pressures are inevitable. But how are organizations set up to support people in those times of pressure? What is it that we do? Now, if we think about that through the lens of hybrid working, we have not got people, sat next to us. People may be working elsewhere in the country. We may be speaking to them once a day over Teams or once a week. How do we check in with those people? How do we have those kind of conversations with those people on a regular basis? What are we doing to make sure that we are really taking care of our people? So how is the organization set up to support people in staying? Can you move on to the next slide, please? So let's have a look at where we are at the moment. Let's just take a step back and let's reflect. What I believe is required is an opportunity to normalize the discussions. That's thinking of language, removing stereotypes, removing negative language. I think that's important. I think it's about creating space in your organizations for authentic conversations. I think it's about talking to people and listening to people and co-creating policies and procedures that have an active effect on your organization. I think it's also about active promotion. It's about saying that, we are taking a cultural approach from this, and also that it is driven by a senior person within the organization. I also think it's very much about having an opportunity to create well-being plans, not just when people may be struggling, but have those conversations as part and parcel of your interaction with your people. It's about challenging negative language and stereotypes. It's about the culture of permissions. I wish that I had been more aware of this and said to my people, look, when you see me doing things that to you may seem unusual and not my usual self. Now, I didn't use the word normal there, my usual self. Please feel free to say, Mark, we're noticing this behavior. Can we have a conversation? Is everything okay? Asking twice is something that I know is used quite a lot in mental health first aid. So having those kind of conversations, permissions to have those conversations, I think is really, really important. So a strategic approach. What is the strategic approach that we need to be taking? Look at your organization vision, mission, and values. Is well-being really part of that? Is the well-being added to the vision, mission, and values? Is it made clear? Do you have visible senior management buy-in from this? When you think about well-being, a lot of it sits within the domain of HR, which is positive in a sense, but does it go beyond that? Is it on the chief executive, the chief people officer? Is it on the managing director's list as well? Is that visible senior management buy-in? How do you deal with transgressions? How do you deal with the negative stereotypes that may be pervading your organization? Are you aware in terms of your organization's design? It's come on again and I can't get rid of that. I do apologize. My calendar keeps coming up. So are you dealing with this in a way that is really helping that organization think about what you do and how you do it and when you do it? Are you promoting connections between your people? Are you promoting mentoring, coaching, and giving people an opportunity to think about how you are working? Are you creating that space for discussion? And it's very easy for me to say on there, people over profit. And I don't want that to be a glib statement. I think what is important here is that people will deliver profit if you look after your people. If you look after your people, you look after how your people are operating. What are you doing here? You know, are you really having this people-centric approach? And are you reviewing on a regular basis how you are operating as an organization? That is really important. So taking it out of this kind of area where we're training our squeezed managers in the middle, which is important. You know, what are we doing from an organizational systemic approach about the well-being? And those are the things. Is it linked to your visions? Is it linked to your senior managers? Is it visible in your senior managers? Is there clear organization design? Are you promoting connections between people? Are you making sure you're doing that? Now, one thing that I also do, I was doing some work the other day with some small businesses, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with business in the community. And if you can go on to the next slide, please, Catherine, that will be really, really helpful. Business in the communities have got a work well model, and this is a screen grab that I got from them. And I quite like this here. Thriving people is at the heart of the business in the communities work well model. Are our people thriving? Are they empowered? Are they present? Are they advocates? You know, are they engaged? And it's all about bringing the whole person into the workplace and the whole organization. And one thing that I'm recognizing in the work that they're doing is that if we look after our people, we look at it from a whole organizational approach, we get what's in the blue area at the back. Positive customer experiences, connected communities, engaged and healthy people. And that's what drives profit. That's what really drives profit. Now, I'm going to end with two things here. If you go on to the next slide, that would be great. So if we think about the next slide, what are the management standards? Now, this is the HSE Government UK site stress standards, and you can look at this yourself. Now, these have been around for a number of years. Now, if we think about the stress standards and just look at the bullet points at the bottom of the screen there, demands, control, support, relationships, role, and change. These, in the eyes of the health and safety executive, are the 6 key areas of organizational design that can have an impact on health and lower productivity. Now, it talks about increased accidents and sickness absence records, but look at that through the lens of mental health. What are the demands that are placed upon your people? You know, are the demands on the people who are working remotely the same as the demands that people are placed on people who are working within the workplace? How do you discuss about those demands? If you are thinking about hybrid working, how much say does a person have in the way that they do work? There are so many models of hybrid working, we could talk about that for days on end, but how much say do they have in how they manage their workload? What kind of support is given to those people within the organization? And do we promote those positive relationships? And do people understand their role? How is work interconnected? What I do in an organization, how does that impact on other people? How does that impact on my colleagues? How do I support my colleagues to be the best that they can be? And how do I help my staff through change? I was doing some work yesterday about organizational change with a team of business owners. And a lot of it is about how change is managed and communicated within the organization. And do we understand not just the change, but the transition, the psychological effect that it has on people? Those are the things that we need to be aware of. The final thing, I think, if we go on to the next slide, is I want to go back to the Robertson Cooper, A Guide to Creating Good Days at Work. So So how can you consider the myriad of needs of individuals in trying to create good days at work? Empower and equip employees. Give them a freedom to act upon their own specific requirements as part of a positive, supportive culture. Equip managers to support the diverse health and well-being needs of their teams. Give them a range of initiatives that really help them. It's about clear values and communication from the top of the organization, from those senior managers that promote good employee decision making when it comes to health and well-being and performance. So let's just recap. Let's have a look at the final bit. Mental health is complex. It's a complex continuum. Look for signs that might signal a decline in health. What are the permissions that you can give? Do you give permissions for people to say, look, Mark, this is not usual for you. Can we have a conversation? But having that conversation from a position of care and love. Do we look at it from a cultural perspective? Do we look at it from what are we doing in organizations when it comes to supporting and promoting good mental health at work? How do we have those conversations, those wellness action plans, not just when things are tough, but during the times when people are coping? How do we have those kind of conversations every day? Are you aware in your organizations where the pressure points are? Are you aware of the times where the pressure is high? Are you aware of the systems and the processes that sometimes impact upon people? And ultimately, how do you create a good day at work? I'm going to stop there, Catherine, if I may.
Yeah, I think you've earned a little break. You have a little sip of water, Mark. We can invite questions now. If anyone's got any questions to Mark that they'd like to send in, please do so using the control panel on your screen, and we will put those to Mark. Yeah. We already had one question from Aisha. She asked, do you have tips on collecting data and research within your organisation for primary prevention? Often this is the hardest area to collect data in.
I think what I want people to do is create that kind of space. During lockdown, I came up with a little acronym or a little structure, and I call it my 4R approach to this. And I haven't mentioned it in this seminar, but I'll mention it now. And the 4R approach is about reflect, review, reconnect, and reboot. And what I mean by that is, after the end of any kind of project, or create space in organizations for people to really reflect on what's working and what's not working for them. Yeah, I think sometimes that qualitative data is really important. You may have a staff survey, and I can almost guarantee that a staff survey will say things about workload, communication, and stress. That's what normally comes out of staff surveys. But do you have focus groups where you can get people in a safe space to really reflect on what's working and what's not working for them? So what's the reflection they're doing? Are you reviewing what you should be doing, what you're starting to do, what you should stop doing, what you should continue doing? Having those conversations. And I think it's about using that space for reflection and that review to think about how can we reconnect with the workplace? What can we do differently before we reboot our businesses, before we reboot and get into that kind of that approach again? And I think that's really, really important to be able to do that. And it's about creating that kind of space. Now, one thing I worked with, and this was a word of warning here. I was working with an organization that shall remain nameless. And I was talking to a senior manager, and the senior manager said to me, he said, oh, we're about to instigate a new staff forum where we're getting staff together to talk about the workplace and the challenges within the workplace. So I said, no, that's great. That's a really good idea. Yes, and I'm going to chair it. And I'm thinking, yeah, I can see that can work. But however, the shadow of the leader, the shadow of the chief executive can sometimes be cast over that group and may prevent people feeling comfortable to say what's really on their mind. So I think it's about trusting people to have the conversation. And if your senior managers aren't there, that's great, but create a culture where that information can be fed back up. because it's a gift. They are giving you a gift about what you can do to make your organisation stronger, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, great, thank you, Mark. And there's a good related question coming from Caroline. She asked, what are your thoughts about wellbeing champions and how they are used in organisations?
Lots of organisations have champions, and I was talking to the group yesterday when we were talking about change champions, and I think, you know, wellbeing champions and change champions do have a place, but it's about understanding what their role is, and also what kind of people they should be. You know, they should be one of the people. They should be seen to be one of the people. They should be seen to be representative. And also, are they given the authority and the responsibility to actually make changes? And I think what's important there is that if your well-being champion is not seen to be one of them, and, you know, do they have their foot firmly planted in the management side rather than the staff side? Now, I'm just talking here, you know, in generalization, is that, are they seen to be authentic? So I think they have got a real place in organizations, but you've got to make sure that they seem to be one of them and the best of them and have that kind of authority. And I think think about those people have got to seem to be trusted. Yeah, they've got to seem to be capable individuals. They've got to seem to be, you know, they're reliable. They know their staff, they know who they're talking to, and they're doing it for the benefit of the people and the organization. So I think choosing the right person is vital for that.
Fantastic. I've got a couple of very closely related questions to each other from Amanda and Nicola around getting managers to encourage visible management buy-in. How can we get very senior managers to visibly show their commitment to mental health and well-being? I think that's kind of like the holy grail for some organizations.
I think it's about authentic and honest conversations, you know, and I think, you know, when we think about senior managing organizations, senior managers are not immune to being somewhere on that continuum, you know, and I think it's okay for people to say, look, you know, I have found it difficult, you know, I have had my challenges in this particular area, and I think it's about the openness and honesty. And, you know, I was assistant HR director within Durham, and I was having a conversation. I never really wanted to be this kind of poster person, but I think it's about the authenticity of those kind of conversations. And I think it's about having it on the agenda of senior meetings and having those kind of conversations and promoting it as well. And really making sure that there is parity between, you know, physical health and mental health, and just talking about people's health in that kind of way. It is the holy grail, and I think there's a lot of work to be done there, but I think that is the challenge that we've got.
I think, for me, just speaking from personal experience, so I report into a C-level executive, but when I'm having conversations with him one-to-one, I often make a point of saying, so how are you doing? It's a two-way conversation. It's not just senior manager should be cascading it down. I think direct reports, if you are an assistant HR director, check in with your HR director, or HR manager, check in with the line above you and below you to see how people are doing. And it's through that you start having more open conversations at all levels, where it shows that people care about each other and are interested in, and it's a safe space to talk. They might not want to, doesn't mean you can't ask and you can't keep asking.
Yeah, and I think it's about having that space, and I think that the challenge that we've got in this new way of working, you know, is about how do we create that space for having those kind of conversations. Now, so Catherine, you're working from home, I take it at the moment.
Yep.
You're having a conversation with your C-level executive. Yeah, do you create space for those kind of conversations? Do you get together either physically or online and have those kind of conversations? And I think, you know, when we have meetings within the workplace, it's normally driven by a business agenda. You know, there are things that we need to cover on the business agenda about what are we achieving or what aren't we achieving, what are the targets. I think it's about having space and say, and how are we feeling about this? And how, you know, what's a good day at work like for you, Catherine? What's been a good day at work and what's driven that for you? What has been one of the challenges that you've got? It's about having that space for the conversations. And I think it's about creating that culture where we do that.
Yeah, definitely. That links back to something else we're doing internally at Ciphr. We had a new CEO join earlier in the year, and he now does a weekly company-wide meeting, and that kicks off with highs and lows from the week across the business. So that kind of creates that space for acknowledging that things are difficult and that things don't go well, and sometimes that's absence, for example, or people feeling stress levels and that kind of stuff. So it's all about creating that space. Sorry, I think one of my reminders has now popped up on screen, but it was a quiet one, so that's good. Anyway, that's reminded me that it's 12 o'clock and we've actually come to the end of our time slot for today. I'm sure we could talk about this forever. Thank you so much, Mark.
I need to go on an IT course, don't I, to shut those. I turned them all off, but they seem to be turning them back on. This is the idea about a Mac, you know. And
that's very insistent. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. We've had loads of positive feedback in the comments, so thank you for that. I will be sure to share that with you, Mark, afterwards. Thank you, Mark, for speaking so candidly about your personal experiences and sharing your expertise. We loved it. Thank you so much. And I'm
if there's any questions that you want me to answer virtually and things like that, I'm quite happy to do that. So that'd be great.
Awesome. And obviously, if you'd like to learn more about e-learning courses from Marshalls or any of Ciphrs HR and LMS software, we're happy to help with that. You can opt in using the exit form that you'll see on your screen after this broadcast for more information, or you can email us at info@ciphr.com. That exit survey is also just going to ask you for a little bit of feedback about today, how you found the session, what else you'd like to see from us on future webinars. So if you have time to fill that in, I would be very grateful. Thanks again for joining us. We hope you have a great rest of the day and take care. Thanks so much. Bye.